Hello anybody, and thanks for tuning in to Monday Morning Handicapping. This is a grain of salt video where I'm going to look at some old racing forms and extrapolate some sort of handicapping angle that I can take with me into the future. And in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the upcoming Mountaineer meet. So I'm going to preview Mountaineer, look at some of the past runners, and come up with some angles and share with you some of those. And hopefully we can find some long shot winners at the upcoming Mountaineer meet. So let's take a look. A little agenda first. We're going to do an intro and background on the Mountaineer Racetrack. We're going to briefly look at my Google Sheets document, all the information that I'm using for this video. Compare and contrast some of the winning angles between sprints and routes. We'll do an all races summary, sprint and routes together, some overall takeaways, and some personal things that I noticed, angles that I came up with while sorting through the Mountaineer racing forms. And the 7 furlong turf races are 2-turn races at Mountaineer and are therefore counted as routes for the purposes of this video. So when they run a 7 furlong or 7/8 of a mile on the turf, it is around 2 turns, so I put those in the route category. A little background information on Mountaineer Racetrack. It's located in New Cumberland, West Virginia. It opened in 1951. This year's race dates are April 20th through December 3rd. It's low-level racing, lots of horses shipping in from all over the Midwest, but also lots stay there year-round. It offers some turf racing, but mostly dirt, and the track is not symmetrical. It's more of a teardrop shape. You can see a little diagram over here. And you'll notice the clubhouse turn, the first turn that they'll run in route, is a little bit sharper and quicker than the turn that they're going to be looking at in sprint races. This one's a lot longer, wider sweeping. This first turn a bit sharper. So for sprints, they'll start up here, run this back stretch, do this big wide sweeping turn and run to the finish. But in routes, they'll start somewhere around here, run this first sharp turn, and then this wide sweeping turn. It's a 1-mile dirt track and a 7 furlong inner turf course. What I like about it is it's low tier track, but decent enough field sizes and long shot prices at win. First post is 4 p.m. West Coast time, Sunday through Wednesday. There's some variations on the days that they race throughout the year. Sometimes it's Sunday through Tuesday, Monday through Wednesday, but for the most part, Sunday through Wednesday is your window to play Mountaineers. It's relatively quick and easy forms to get through for a little bit of workday fun. Again, first race is at 4 p.m., so when I get home from work, there's still plenty of races to look at, and I can read the racing forms relatively quickly the night before. Mark and Nancy provide in-depth analysis and fun banter at times. I'm not sure that Nancy still does the pre and post race analysis, but Mark cracks me up, and when they're together, I hope they're still doing the show together, but they crack me up and they provide some really good insight on the races that are coming up. Lots of angles when making selections. Good form is fairly inconsistent. You'll see a lot of races where horses aren't winning often or running very well often or as of late. So you got to get a little creative at Mountaineer and come up with some other angles. Maybe a trainer's going really well, or a jockey, or you like a cut back in distance or a stretch out in distance, or maybe a certain sire. You got to think outside the box sometimes at Mountaineer. So it's a good practice and exercise for your handicapping angles. Biases seem to appear often and can be capitalized on. From race to race, from day to day, you'll see speed horses do really well. You'll see closers do really well. You'll see horses on the rail run well, or horses on the rail run not so well, and a lot of deep closers wide out on the track. So just keep an eye on who's winning and where on the racetrack they're winning from. But now let's take a look at my Google Sheets and the breakdown of all the statistical information I'm using for this video. So here you can see I broke down the races by sprint, by route, and then total them up. I averaged out the post positions of each winner. So in sprints, the average post position was post 3.3, so pretty close down to the rail. For tag, this is the claiming price for each horse that won its race. Are they moving up or down or staying at the same class level? As many of you know, and some of you that don't, many races are claiming races, which means that horses are in for a certain purchase price. The horses can be purchased for whatever the claiming race is. So for example, if a horse is running in a maiden $5,000 race and wins that race and is now in for a claiming race of $3,500, while the claiming race may be a tougher race than the maiden race was, I am considering that moving down in class. How were they moving up or down or staying at the same class level? I looked at best last out speed figures. So for horses that had the best last out speed figure, how many of those won? 13 out of 55, for example, had the best last out speed figure. Cutting back from a route to a sprint race, horses coming off of a layoff, which means hasn't raced in the last 45 days. How many horses won their first ever race at Mountaineer out of 55? And shippers, horses that were coming in from other tracks around the country. And I tallied up what tracks that those horses were coming from and winning. Also did the same for route races, which are 2 turns or mile or greater. the average post position, the claiming tag, are they moving up the claiming ranks, down the claiming ranks, or staying at the same level? The best last out speed figure for routes, stretching out, so going from a sprint race to a route, the layoff horses, first time ever at Mountaineer, and shippers that came in one routing at Mountaineer. And then I tallied them up and gave you the percentages for those. And we're not going to go too deep into it on this page. I will provide a link to this file in the description below if you want to take a look for yourself. But now let's go back to my Google Slides and take a look at some of the things that I found while going through my 75 total previous Mountaineer racing forms. So the first thing we're going to look at is post position. The average post position in sprints was 3.3, so somewhat down near the rail. Any potential inside bias could be emphasized due to the sweeping far turn into the home stretch as opposed to the clubhouse turn, which was that much sharper turn. Easier for inside horses to maintain speed going around a wider turn. So the turn's not as sharp, so fast horses have an advantage because they can maintain that speed, because that one turn that they're going to face in sprints is a lot more gradual. So running down near the rail can give you an advantage because you're not running as far of ground going wide around a turn. In routes, the average post position was 5.2. Seems horses can win from any post position in routes. 5.2 right smack dab in the middle. So we had some horses winning down on the rail. We had some horses winning from way outside. It averaged out to 5.2. Again, only a sample size of 20. That's why this video is in the grain of salt playlist. Sharper clubhouse turn might be a shorter overall distance, therefore there might be less ground loss going wider around that shorter turn, and a longer sweeping far turn after the backstretch allows runners from behind to get into position and make their gradual bid for the win. So let's go back and take a look at that diagram. When they're running a route race, they're going to go around this quick sharp turn, and even if you're wide, it's not as long as a conventional turn. So while you may be losing ground going wider, you're not running as far of a distance overall around this turn. So even if you lose some ground here, you can make up for it hopefully on the backstretch, and then this gradual wide turn where hopefully you're starting to put in your move to vie for the lead and try to win the race. You're not cutting a tight corner here, so your speed should carry you a little bit better around this wider turn. You shouldn't have to run as drastically fast as you would on a really sharp turn if you're on the outside. So I think that just is why some horses are able to win from the outside as well as the inside on these routes. I would slightly lean in favor of inside horses when talent level is comparable in sprints. So in sprint races, if the field looks pretty evenly matched, I might lean down towards the inside just because they can maintain their speed around that wider turn and not run as far of ground. But there is no big emphasis on post position in routes. Tag, again, from any class to another. So whether you're going from a maiden to a claiming race, or from a claiming race up to a stakes race, or a stakes race down to an allowance race, as long as the tag moves, that's what I'm factoring in, regardless of the overall class, such as the maiden to claiming race. If the purchase price went up or down, that's what I'm tallying. So in sprint races, horses that were going up for claiming tags, so more expensive to buy the next race, 10 out of 55 won their races sprinting, 18.2%. Horses that were moving down in claiming tag, 29 of 55 or 52%. Staying at the same class level or class tag or claiming tag, 16 of 55, 29.1. Over in routes, horses that were moving up in tag, 6 of 20 won their race, 30%. Moving down in claiming tag, 5 of 20, 25%. Staying at the same price level or purchase price, 9 of 20, 45%. More sprinters win when jumping down in class or are in for the same price tag. Added up, it's 81.8% overall. More routers win when jumping up in class or are in for the same price tag, 75% overall. So where you can see that in your racing form, we'll take this horse, Moontime, for example, was running at the $8,500 claiming tag, ran fourth place by 26 lengths, so well beaten, jumps down almost in half for a $4,500 purchase price, ran third by 2 lengths, a little bit better, ran again at 4,500, won that race, jumped down to 4,000, no conditions though, so probably a tougher race, but for the purposes of this video, I would consider this a jump down. Did not win that race, ran sixth, jumped down and tag again to 3,500, ran fourth by 2 lengths, stayed at the same level, 3,500, with a condition, ran second by a half length. And right up here, you can see the claiming tag that they are in for in today's race, $3,500. So for the purposes of this video, regardless of the conditions of the race or how difficult the race looks, this horse is in the same tag as the previous race, $3,500. Best last out figure. In sprints, horses with the best last out figure, 13 of 55 sprinters had the best last out figure, which equates to 23.6%. For routes, 5 of 20 that had the best last out figure won their race, so 25%. Statistically similar win rates for horses with the best figure last time out versus the rest of the field. And where you can find this, here's another example. This bold number is called a buyer speed figure. Horses that had the highest number right here at the top, which would be their most recent race. You can see May 2024. The race before that was September 2023. And when I looked at Mountaineer, about 25% of the horses that had the highest bold number here, regardless of where they ran or what surface or what distance they ran it, the highest bold number here won about 25% of the time. And these numbers are calculated based on the speed of the race they ran that day and how fast the track was playing that day. But overall, horses that had the highest number here compared to the rest of the field won about 25% of the time, whether it was a sprint or a route race. Change in distance type. So for horses that won a sprint race, how many were cutting back from a mile or a two-turn race? 6 of 55 sprinters won doing this angle, making this move, cutting back from a mile or more, which equates to about 11%. And routers that were stretching out from a sprint race coming into a mile or a two-turn race, 7 of 20 winners were coming in with that angle, coming from a sprint race to a route, which equates to 35%. Horses seem to win more often when going from sprints to routes than routes to sprint, as you can tell by the percentages up top. Is there anything in their sprint running line that might indicate that they would prefer more distance, closing fast but ran out of time against horses that were not slowing down too much? So when you look at the racing form and you see a horse that was closing in a sprint race, you need to find out either by watching replays or really scrutinizing the racing form. Was this horse really closing, or were the horses in first place, second place, third place slowing down a little too tired that made it look like the horse was actually closing? You're going to have to do your due diligence there, but you're going to have to find out, was the horse actually running on strong lay, or were the horses in front just slowing down? Here's an example. This horse has already won the sprint to route angle at 22-1, so catch this angle beforehand. So we're going to look at this horse, Love a Happy Ending. Started out in a 1 mile route. He showed some speed. He was in second by a head early on in the race and just faded, did not have the stamina. Cut back to a sprint race, so here's that route to sprint angle. Was near last early on and closed very fast late to lose by 3/4 of a length, second place by 3/4. So looks like he put in a really good rally. Then next race went back to that longer route race, which are typically run a lot slower earlier on because horses don't want to gas themselves out. So it's a little bit slower pace. Longer race, he can save some of that stamina for later. This horse was stalking the leader. Again, those races are a little bit slower, going a longer distance. You don't want to gas out. Stalked those leaders and just took over in the later part of the races and ended up winning at 22.8-1 odds. So as you can see in the sprint, closed furiously, went to a longer race, did his same closing tactic and just ran away from the field to win at 22-1 odds. And that's how you would look at your racing form and know if the horse is stretching out or cutting back in distance. So here's a look at horses that won coming off of a layoff. In sprints, 21 of 55 or 38% of horses coming off of a layoff won a sprint race at Mountaineer. For routes, 0 of the 20 route winners won coming off of a layoff. A gap of 45 days or more since their last race is considered a layoff. It's indicated by a line between race dates. Horses don't seem to come off a layoff and win routing first time back at Mountaineer. Example, past performances or the racing form provide the win rate of the trainer coming back from this particular length of layoff. So if we look at this horse in your racing form, if you see a thin little line right here, that means the horse is coming off of a layoff. If you see a double line, that means that horse is coming off of an extended layoff. I think it's a year or more if there's 2 lines. But this indicates that the horse is coming off of a layoff. And again, a layoff is 45 days or more. Down below, horses that are coming off of a layoff, you will see the trainer stats for horses coming off of a layoff of certain amount of days. So for example, this horse is coming off of a layoff of 180 days or more. This trainer has had 9 runners coming off of a layoff this long, has not won, so 0% win rate and $0 return, obviously no winners. But here's where you can see the stats for this particular trainer, Alan Bozell, does not seem to get horses ready to win off of a 180 day or more layoff. First race at Mountaineer. So if this is first ever race at Mountaineer, horses that won with this angle while sprinting, there were 16 out of the 55 sprint winners won their first ever race at Mountaineer. That's 29.1%. First ever race at Mountaineer for routers coming in and routing for the first time ever setting foot at Mountaineer, 9 of 20, so 45%. Horses coming into Mountaineer for the first time have a solid win rate in both sprints and routes, 29% and 45%, very solid win rates. So keep an eye out for horses coming to Mountaineer for the very first time ever in their careers. Their win rate is pretty solid. Mountaineer hosts a big race day on West Virginia Derby Day, which has many routes with higher class horses shipping in for the route races. So typically, like I said, Mountaineer is a lower tier level of racing, but they do have one particular day where a lot of really good horses come from all over the country to race, and there's a lot of high class route races. So I think a lot of these route winners, first time ever at Mountaineer, are top level horses coming in for the big day. But this is just what the percentages boil down to with my selective racing forms. Again, this is a grain of salt video, so take it for what it's worth. Example, past performances provide the records for each horse at this track they're going to be racing on. So I don't have any digital Mountaineer racing form, so I had to use Emerald Downs. But here's an example of a horse running at Emerald Downs for the first time ever. If we look up top, this horse's lifetime record, 79 races in his career, 0 at Emerald Downs. So this is the very first time this horse has ever raced at Emerald Downs. When you're looking at Mountaineer past performances, you'll see MNR for Mountaineer abbreviated here. If you see all zeros, that indicates that this is the first time this horse has ever raced at Mountaineer. Just like this is the first time this horse has ever raced at Emerald Downs. Shippers, so horses coming in from any other track, whether or not they've raced at Mountaineer before, but their most recent race was at another track. So for sprints, 39 of 55 sprint winners in my racing forms were horses coming from another track, 71%. The track that they came from the most was MVR, which I believe is Mahoning Valley Racecourse. 15 out of the 39 shipping horses won coming from this racetrack, which is 38.5% of all shippers that won sprint races came from this track. Turfway Park, 7 of 39 of the shippers won coming from Turfway, 17.9%. Charlestown, 4 of 39, so 10%. Presque Isle, Thistle Downs each had 2, so 5.1% each. And then Delmar, Keeneland, Monmouth, Finger Lakes, Delaware, Prairie Meadows, Laurel Park, Houston, and Oaklawn Park each had 1 of the 39, so that's 2.6% each. For routes, 14 out of the 20 route winners were shippers, so horses that had raced at any other racetrack before they won routing at Mountaineer. They may have run at Mountaineer before, but 14 of the 20 winners I had most recently run at another racetrack, 70%. Mahoning Valley, Tampa, Delaware, and Indianapolis, 2 of 14 each, so 14.3% of the shippers came from one of these tracks in their most recent start. And then Penn National, Presque Isle, Belterra, Thistledown, I believe that's Woodbine and Suffolk Downs, 1 of 14 each, so 7.1% each. Shippers have a very high success rate back at Mountaineer, probably due to the recency bias of fitness. So in the Midwest, there's lots of tracks in a small area, so they don't have to ship too far. The horses that seem to stay at Mountaineer year round take about a 5 to 6 month break between racing seasons. So the horses that had been racing in the area but not at Mountaineer probably have a fitness bias. They're more ready to race, they're in race shape, they're better conditioned. So when they come back to Mountaineer, when Mountaineer opens, they have that edge on the horses that took a 6 month break. It might just be a little bit out of shape, need a few races to get back to peak performance. So look for horses that have been racing recently coming back to Mountaineer. Again, Mahoning Valley Racecourse is the most common place horses ship from before winning back at Mountaineer. And there's an example on the next slide of where you can see horses that are shipping. So these are all abbreviations of racetracks that this horse has raced at. We have Albany, Zia Park, Sunland, Turfway Park. I'm not sure what SRP is, but up top is the most recent races. If you see horses at Mountaineer that most recently ran at MBR or Mahoning Valley, especially early on in the racing meet at Mountaineer, give them an extra look. And a lot of times when I was going through racing forms, the horses did not look good on paper. They were running last a bunch of times at Mahoning Valley, but coming to Mountaineer and win. A lot of people won't bet horses that have, a dirty form, as they call it. It looks like they can't win a Mountaineer, but Mountaineer is a lower tier track. It doesn't take a super horse to win at Mountaineer. If you're unsure, this is one of those angles I was talking about earlier where you got to get a little bit creative. Sometimes you might just blindly take a horse because it's the only one that was racing at MBR most recently, and maybe it's just in good shape and there's no real standouts in the race. But here is where you see what tracks a horse has been running at recently. So this is totals, sprint, and routes combined. 75 total races that I had in my garage. The average post position for both, 4.2. Moving up in claiming tag, 21%. Down in claiming tag, 45%. At the same level, 33%. Horses with the best last out speed figure, 24% won their next race. A distance change, so a route to a sprint or a sprint to a route, 17% overall. Coming off the layoff, 28%. First time ever at Mountaineer, 33%, and horses who most recently raced at a different racetrack, 71%. Average winning post being 4.2 indicates there's not a super strong bias overall in terms of post position. Horses going down in tag tend to win fairly often, whether it's sprints or routes, about 45%. Horses are quite successful on their first race at Mountaineer, 33% overall. That's a pretty decent win rate. And horses shipping in from other tracks are extremely successful, 71% overall. Now, here's a few things that just I noticed personally when sorting through my racing forms. Be wary of horses that tend to win loose on the lead only at Mountaineer. There are horses that have a need the lead type, and when horses win like this, where you see their run line and they're in first by a length and a half, it's pretty easy for them to win. Was a length early, 2.5 lengths, and went on to win, but you could see the margin was getting cut short. I noticed a lot of horses look good on paper at Mountaineer when they were loose on the lead, but didn't end up winning a ton of races, especially when it was only at Mountaineer. Now, when horses were running loose on the lead at other tracks and getting caught, because they're a higher class of racetrack, better animals at those tracks, they can kind of be forgiven for giving up a loose lead there. But when horses only win with a loose lead at Mountaineer, I would really scrutinize them. It may look good on paper, but when other horses come in from some of those other tracks, some of those shippers that were winning at 70% come in and face one of these loose leaders that only seem to do their best running at Mountaineer loose on the lead, take a really close look and see if that horse is really a standout. When cutting back from route to sprint, there seems to be more success when cutting back to a full 6 furlong sprint. This makes sense because routes are a mile or more typically. So the longer the sprint is, the more friendly it will be to horses that have been routing. It's the longest sprint race Mountaineer offers. So when horses are cutting back from a mile or so to a one-turn sprint, look for horses that are running a full 6 furlong sprint and not a 5 or a 5.5 furlong sprint. When fields of horses have only had a few starts, consider career earnings. Something I noticed looking at Mountaineer, some horses that won at decent odds had some of the highest career earnings. So if we compare these two horses from the same race, this horse has raced 8 times in its life and has earned $16,000, which averages out to a little over $2,000 per race it's earning. Where this horse over here has raced 2 times in its life, but has earned $11,000, which is about $5,500 each race that it's run. So maybe factor that in. Again, this is one of those angles where you got to get a little bit creative when the horses don't look good in their run lines. Look for other things that can steer you to a possible win contender. And weak fields of maidens. Maidens, again, are horses that have never won a race before. All the horses in the race are looking for their first win ever. Look for unproven losers or any glimpses of speed in their past races. Unproven losers are basically horses that have not won yet, but have only raced a handful of times. Sometimes you'll see horses that have raced 10, 15, 20 or more times and have yet to win. That just tells me that the horse doesn't have what it takes to win. Of course, they could win and do from time to time, but I would rather blindly take a horse that has only raced twice and lost each time than a horse that's raced 20 times and lost each time. Even if those speed horses faded poorly, combined with any other positives such as a stretch out, first time at Mountaineer, etc. So look for any horses where that run line shows any ones or maybe a 2 by a neck or 3 by a neck. Any horses that showed a glimpse of speed, at least they have some speed. And if the horse breaks well and on a speed friendly track that Mountaineer can be at times, sometimes any glimpse of speed can be a handicapping angle that you can take, especially in a weak field of maidens. Combine that with any other of the angles we talked about, such as a stretch out or the first time ever at Mountaineer or shipping in from another track, that can be very much so a positive. Horses that debuted, meaning made their first ever career start at Mountaineer, might just be cheap, relatively untalented runners overall. Typically, owners and trainers don't want to start good horses at Mountaineer. The purses are low and you're not really testing your horse. You want to go for the bigger money. So you're not going to start a horse that you think is really talented at Mountaineer typically. Maybe Mahoning Valley even, one of the Midwest tracks in the area. So if they made their first ever start at Mountaineer, I would give that horse a second look and see who it beat that day, who it raced against, how it fared. But a horse making its first ever start at Mountaineer might be a red flag just because it is a cheaper racetrack. And look at trainer percentages with certain moves in ROI. I saw lots of horses that won at big odds where The trainer stat line could tell you that this horse was ready to win doing this certain angle. Anything $3 and greater is very good and noteworthy in terms of ROI. So look down here at the bottom of the racing form for each horse. You'll see a trainer stat line. Here's an example of a horse second off a layoff of 45 to 180 days. This trainer has had 111 runners come off a layoff like that. This is second off the layoff, so second race after this long of a break. 13% win rate out of those 111 runners doing this move with a $1.03 ROI for every $2 wagers, so not a fantastic return. This horse was also going from a sprint to a route race. This trainer has had 85 horses doing that move. 15% win rate with the $1.78 ROI, so still a little negative for a $2 wager. 31 to 60 day layoff, or just a little bit of break, maybe not quite a layoff. 270 horses that have had this kind of a break, 14% win rate. $1.56 ROI for a $2 bet, so still negative, and so on and so forth. But anytime you see a $3 ROI here, take note of that. That is an angle that the trainer has had success with or is at least profitable. And any high percentages here for any of the angles you see that the trainer is doing this race, definitely make note of that, especially at Mountaineer, where it doesn't take a super horse again to win a race at Mountaineer. That's it for Mountaineer. I want to thank everyone for watching. Feedback is appreciated, whether it be positive, negative, suggestions, or recommendations. Again, a link to my Google Sheets file will be included in the description below. I took a little break from the Kentucky Derby breakdown videos just because the field is now set. I'll probably go back and take a look at the field and cover some horses that I have yet to cover and just really get a good sense of who's in the race and who's going to be my top contender. But with Mountaineer coming up soon, I wanted to cover this racetrack because I do intend on playing it pretty frequently. Please like, subscribe, and or share with friends. My target audience is folks that are relatively new to the sport. So if you know anyone that's interested in the sport or wants to learn more about it, I have a couple of playlists you can send to them. One is How to Read a Racing Form. I believe it's a 10-part couple minute videos of breaking down the racing form, which each section is telling you how you can decipher it. And I try to explain things very simply, as I do in all my videos, just so that newcomers really understand the game and feel welcome listening. I also have a betting on horse racing playlist where I break down each bet that a typical racetrack offers the player. I tell you what the bet is, how much it costs depending on your ticket structure, and a few things that I look for before placing such wagers. So I think those are really good starting points. If you know anybody who's interested about the game, send them links to those playlists. And I hope that they really start to understand the game and can handicap for themselves as opposed to relying on other people for tips. I think the game is really fun. So the more people we can get involved, the merrier. So thanks again to everybody for watching. I really appreciate all the support I've gotten. Good luck to everybody that's going to be playing Mountaineer. I'm sure I'll put out some videos when I look through a race card and tell you who I like. But until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.